Good evening, and welcome to Pinellas County's eTownHall Transit Alternatives for a Stronger, Faster Pinellas. I'm Bob Clifford, Executive Director of the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transportation Authority, otherwise known as TBARTA, and moderator for tonight's event. Thanks for joining us. Tonight we've assembled a panel from the Pinellas Transit Alternatives Analysis Team to answer your questions about transit options in Pinellas County. Joining us are Frank Hibbard, Mayor of Clearwater, TBARTA Board Member and Pinellas MPO Member. Next we have Harriet Crozier, Vice Mayor of the City of Largo and Pinellas Metropolitan Planning Organization Board Member. We also have Sarah Ward, Pinellas Metropolitan Planning Organization Interim Executive Director. With us tonight is Don Skelton, FDOT District 7 Secretary. And rounding out our panel is Brad Miller, PSTA's Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Tonight's Transportation eTownHall is online and on call, meaning you can participate by either blogging your questions through the eTownHall website, by listening on the phone, or you may be watching on PCC TV on Bright House Channel 622, Knowledge Channel 18, or Verizon Channel 44. The eTownHall blog opened yesterday morning at 9 a.m. We've already received many questions. If you'd like to join us online, log into the eTownHall website at pinellascounty.org/eTownHall. We're also calling a random sample of 40,000 residents right now to take part by phone. If you haven't been called but would prefer to ask your question by phone, just dial the toll-free number on your screen. That number will be available on your screen throughout tonight's discussion. If you're participating by phone and would like to ask a question, press 0 at any time, and you'll be transferred to one of our volunteers who will take your name and your question. If you'd like to receive regular project updates by email, please press 7. In whatever way you're joining us tonight, thank you, and keep those questions and comments coming in. Let's get started. We will have this conversation tonight in two parts. First, we'll talk in general about what we are trying to do for Pinellas County, and after a little while, we'll focus on where we are in the study. While there are many other efforts to examine transportation improvements countywide, the focus of tonight's conversation will be about making the connections between the three largest activity centers in Pinellas County: Clearwater, Greater Gateway, and St. Petersburg, plus connecting across the bay to Hillsborough County and future regional services. Maybe we should start by talking about what an alternatives analysis is and what the team is working towards. This study examines premium transit improvements that are right for our community, like a fast bus or rail service. The key questions being answered by this study are: what is the right project? Where will it go? What type of transit should we use? And how will we build it? For more detailed information, please visit our project website at pinellasontrack.com. Now let's hear from our panelists. First question, let's start with Mayor Hibbard. Mayor Hibbard, what can we expect to come out of the Pinellas Transit Alternatives Analysis?
Well, first, Bob, I think you have a career possibly in newscasting. Outstanding job. Thank you all for tuning in today. What is the AA all about? What we've really done is we've taken all the potential routes within Pinellas County from north to south and narrowed them down. I consider it basically a funnel. And we are looking at different routes, different technologies, and different places for stations, and trying to figure out where that best location will be. And so through that whole process, we've narrowed all the options down, and we will be coming forward with alternatives. We'll have a build alternative, and then we'll have a design alternative, which will be our fallback position should that build alternative not work out because of right-of-way or costs or some other reason.
Secretary Skelton, taking off on that, how do you see this project impacting the transportation system, not only in Pinellas County, but actually the entire region?
Well, let me start by saying, while we still have a significant amount of investment that needs to be made in the highway system, this project is going to be helpful in moving the people not only throughout Pinellas County, but as you touched on, connecting on over to Hillsborough and other areas of the region, which will connect the region more and help people move throughout that region more efficiently.
Vice Mayor Crozier, what do you believe is the most important thing for the community to know about the Pinellas Transit Alternatives Analysis?
Well, first let me say good evening to everyone, and it's good to be here with all of you. What's most important about the alternative analysis is it's the foundation. As was just mentioned, we can't build roads anymore. We're running out of space. We need to find a way to move people around. And a premium transit opportunity is knocking on our door, and Pinellas is saying, you know what, let's build this foundation, let's take this first step, and this analysis that we are doing is doing all of that so that we can, and we know we're going to talk about it later, rejuvenate and bring economy and jobs back into Pinellas County and make us a place that people want to come to.
Perfect. Why don't we start tonight? Let's take our first viewer question. We have from the blog from Sandy, who asks, what are our chances of getting federal funding for the project, and how much would it account for? Why don't we start with Brad?
Well, it's a good question, and one that our study team has been looking at. The process for getting federal funds to build a light rail or bus rapid transit system is very competitive. There are dozens of cities around the United States all trying to become more competitive and trying to get the very limited pot of federal dollars. So our project has to be competitive. The odds of us getting funds are good. We've done exactly what the federal government wants, and looking at all these alternatives, as the mayor noted, and funneling it down. We recently went up to the Atlanta office of the Federal Transit Administration and showed them where we are so far, and they were very positive about what we've done so far. So we're on the right track, but it's certainly going to take a lot more study and analysis to be able to secure that. Ultimately, we could perhaps receive as much as 50% of the total cost of what we decide to do from the federal government, with the other 50% coming from a combination of state, local, and even private partnerships.
And taking off on that, Secretary Skelton, it really is about leveraging and partnerships when you talk about transportation funding, isn't it?
Absolutely. From the state perspective, any investment in transportation, whether it be highway, transit, or whatever, we're looking to leverage dollars from whether it be local sources or other sources to be able to package that financing together. There's got to be enough people in the game to bring it all together that everybody has a stake in that project.
And Mayor Hibbard, the private sector being part of the solution in terms of transportation funding and for projects such as this.
That's one of the reasons that we're doing this. I think we all know with the economic times that we've been in that economic development is critical to our region. We're trying to attract businesses, give people an alternative as far as getting around. And also there's job creation from this, and that's critical. Wayne Gretzky was probably known as the greatest hockey player of all time. And he said, it's not because I skate to where the puck is, I skate to where I believe it will be. We have to start looking at where we are going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now and start to skate toward that. And that's what this planning is all about.
Absolutely. Let's go. We have another question on our blog from Tom, who asked us a question. What's the average cost of a mile of rail versus a mile of roadway? Maybe Sarah, start with you, and knowing how the MPO looks at those options as they develop their plan, and then maybe also Secretary Skelton.
When you look at the cost to construct a roadway type project, you're looking at the engineering cost, right-of-way cost, and all of those same factors that you would have to look at in building a rail corridor. So you'll have similar cost per mile for each of the two types of improvements. Certainly the improvements are different, but you still need right-of-way. You'll still need to do engineering work as well. So the costs are going to be similar in both cases.
Secretary Skelton?
Well, as an engineer, I wish it were easy to say it's X amount per mile versus X amount versus Y amount per mile. It's not that easy. On the highway side, you have ranges depending on what type of road you're talking about. An interstate facility with interchanges and a lot of bridges. You've got expensive rights-of-ways where there are business accesses. If you're talking about arterials, US 19, when we were buying right-of-way on US 19, that was a very expensive right-of-way. So it has a wide range, so it's not just clear-cut as it's this amount versus this amount. And the same thing holds true on the transit side, too. If you're talking about systems that have more frequent service, more frequent stops, it's going to be more expensive than those that don't have those things.
Just as a reminder for everybody, if you're participating by phone and would like to ask us a question, press 0 at any time, and you'll be transferred to one of our volunteers who will take your name and your question. Whatever way you're joining us, please keep those questions and comments coming in. We have a question via telephone from Yvonne. Her question is, are the plans going forward with rail, or is this still being discussed? Hey, Brad?
Well, the alternatives analysis is nearing its completion in the next 2 months. It is down to looking at a bus rapid transit line in its own right-of-way, or a light rail line between Clearwater and the Gateway area and St. Petersburg. So it hasn't been decided yet. There were other technologies considered, commuter rail or a bus system in mixed traffic, and those have been thrown out, so we're down to 2, and that's where we stand today. The Project Advisory Committee, which we have all been participating in, is going to be meeting in one more time in December, and then making an ultimate decision in January.
And Vice Mayor Crozier, I know you've gone through a voluminous amount of information on all of the different technologies and alignments and all of these parts of the process in the AA, and it's really been a really detailed effort, hasn't it?
It has been, and I do give credit to the firm that's working with us, bringing the material. We also have a group of technical people. Many of our staffs are behind the scenes. And so that when we do get it and we get to discuss it, they've brought it down to, these are the decisions that you need to make, and this is, either it's a good or it's bad, but you need to make the call. And so it's a step-by-step, and many times we have said, you know, you need to go look at this. This is what the people have said. So it keeps changing the process, but it's involved, and I think we've all enjoyed it. Maybe we thought there was going to be more work. They've made it so easy for us at times.
And Mayor Hibbard, knowing that you like lots of information and lots of statistics, a lot of that information has been provided as part of this effort.
It has. We're constantly looking at the costs, the ridership, depending on the different routes. And one of the most important things is what we call TOD, or transit-oriented development. Because one of the things that we want to come out of this is that the development patterns that we've had in this area are going to change. I think what we all know in Florida is urban sprawl. We expect a lot of development along those transit corridors, and that's where that economic development comes from. So the people that live away from that corridor are not going to be as affected as much as those areas that we're looking at. And the wonderful thing about the corridors we've chosen is there is a lot of potential for new development of businesses and residential around those areas.
Our next question comes in from John McNamara. John asks us, and Brad, I'm going to shoot it to you first, how can you assure us that the costs of light rail or other options will not increase our taxes in any way in the future? And the second part of his question, which I think maybe take first, is there any public mass transit system that is financially self-supporting in Florida?
No, there's not. There is no public transit system or roadway transportation system that is profit-making in the United States. It just doesn't exist. PSTA has a relatively good cost recovery ratio at about 25% of our costs are paid for by the customers. But that's one of the better ones in the state of Florida. As far as what we want to do and invest in this new transportation, we're going to need additional revenue to build whatever we do or to expand whatever. When we add new buses on the route today, on a PSTA route, we need revenue to support that. So this is going to take a significant investment, and we're going to need a new revenue source. We are looking at a possibility of a sales tax in Pinellas County to support this. But that would have to go before the voters, and they would have to vote for it and decide for themselves whether this is something they want for their community.
And Sarah, I know that's something that the MPO looks at as you develop your plan, is what are the revenue sources and how do you plan out into the future?
That's a key point in what we do as the MPO. As you mentioned earlier, these processes are not short-term projects. We're looking 20, 25 years out, and as we look 20, 25 years out in terms of the needs in the community, we also have to look at how we're going to respond to those needs in terms of paying for them. So we do look at future revenue sources from the federal government, from the state government, and what we might be able to generate here locally. And we know with all of our transportation projects, it's typically a partnership involving numerous governmental agencies. So yes, it is a long-term effort requiring lots of dollars for both roads and transit. And we're always looking into the future as we do our planning.
Secretary Skelton, there's that partnering discussion again about financing a project.
Absolutely. It takes the local source of funding to mix in with the federal and state to make a project successful.
Our next question comes via blog from Margaret, who asks, what exactly is bus rapid transit? I think we all laugh because that is a really good question. And maybe Mayor Hibbard, start with you and then we'll go to Brad.
Well, Brad's probably the expert, but we've batted that around a lot, Margaret. And I think BRT, which is the abbreviation, is used very loosely. But the way that we're using BRT in this conversation is we are talking about dedicating lanes with overpasses or preemption of lights and intersections so that the bus is basically moving just like a rail car. And when you start to get it to that level, the cost rises to be very similar to rail. One of the debates we've had is, as I've said about TOD or transit-oriented development, is when you put something down, steel rails that are parallel, the private sector tends to invest around that to a greater extent than they do with BRT. And that's one of the great advantages of it. We're expecting 67,000 new jobs if the choice is light rail, 48,000 if it's BRT. But there's cost differentials, and that's some of the decisions we're grappling with.
I think that's right. Really the way to interpret bus rapid transit, and no, Margaret is not alone in not exactly understanding that. We've done some polling recently at PSTA, and the vast majority of people have questions about it, what that exactly means. But think of it as basically a light rail system or a rail system with rubber tires. But as the mayor said, there is an advantage of a bus rapid transit system by being on rubber tires is that it can come off that fixed guideway and go into other areas. But the disadvantage of that is that, at least in the United States, the private sector has not been willing to invest in building new buildings around bus rapid transit systems because they can be moved. Somebody like me, the head of a transit system, could decide, oh, that route is not very good, and we can move it to another place, and then the investment by the private sector would not be worth it. That's why the fixed investment, and frankly the large investment that cities are doing in rail, by fixing it into the ground, is what incentivizes the private sector to develop. At least that's what's been shown in the U.S.
And Sarah, talking about fixed investment and rail, we have a question from Jerry via the telephone who asks us, have we considered an elevated rail system like they have in Chicago?
Over the course of the years, we've looked at elevated rail, and we're finding in the case of Pinellas County, because of the right-of-way impacts and the cost, that we're looking at an at-grade system at this point with regard to light rail transit. But in some of the earlier studies, we looked at a system like a Disney-like system, an elevated monorail. So we've considered elevated systems, and even as we go forth with this study, once a final technology decision is made, as we look at the final operations, there may be some opportunities for elevation even here.
I just want to remind everybody to keep your blog questions coming in. And if you're participating by phone, please press 0 to ask your question. On the phone, we have a question from Donna, who asks, why don't you partner up with Tampa and build and pay for a train and bus lines? Can we have that line? Can we have a line that goes to downtown Tampa? We start with Mayor Hibbard.
Well, that is our dream, Donna. We want to. I don't think you care where the Pinellas County line ends and Hillsborough starts. We want to get from point A to point B. Hillsborough had approached this process last year. It failed at referendum. I think one of the differences is they finished their AA just about a month before the referendum. We're finishing it in the next 2 months. It'll give plenty of time for all of our citizens to really ask questions and to become comfortable with it. But ultimately, what we want to do is connect the entire Tampa Bay area. If we don't do that, we are not going to be a success.
And Secretary Skelton, talking from the perspective of incremental pieces and building as part of a system, that's really what this whole approach is.
Absolutely. From the state's perspective, any investment that we're going to have in a regional system needs to be building towards that regional system. And something that's just centric to Pinellas County from a state perspective, if that's where it ends, that's not good enough. It really needs to connect this region. And when you look at Tampa Bay, this region is more than just Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. It's much bigger than that. And you've got to tie that all together with one cohesive system. And
I know Brad, the Federal Transit Administration's asked that same question. Is this part of a bigger Tampa Bay system?
That's right. That was their first question out of their mouths, is how we. So when are you going to get over to Tampa, or how is your plan working within the whole regional context? Because outside the region, and even from a competitiveness of the region compared to other parts of the city, they view us as one region or one competitor necessarily. And so this investment needs to go over county lines into the future.
But we're studying that, and I think the Secretary should talk about that, because we're looking at the Howard Franklin to get to Hillsborough County.
Absolutely. And the mayor talked about what Hillsborough County had done previously with their studies. We are doing the study in conjunction with PSTA, TBARTA, and the MPO as well, looking at the replacement of the Howard Franklin Bridge and what accommodations for all the modes of transportation. As we relook at our interstate systems, we're also looking at managed lane concepts and those type things. Well, managed lanes fit very well if you're talking about BRT systems. But if you're talking about a light rail system, does it need to be another bridge structure? How do you get across that bay? We need to make sure that we're studying, and we've identified what that alternative is, depending what comes out of the Pinellas alternatives analysis, depending what's going to happen in Hillsborough County, and then you connect them to across the Howard Franklin.
And going to Secretary Skelton, it's not just looking at it just from a regional perspective, but it's also looking at all modes. It's not an either-or scenario. It's not roads versus transit. It's a full, correct, complete transportation system, is it not?
Absolutely. The amount of people that the transit system is going to move, there's still going to be a significant amount of cars and vehicles on the roadways, and we've got to be able to move them more efficiently. And that's why we're looking at managed lane concepts throughout the entire Bay Area. And taking off on that point, and Sarah, a little bit what you were talking about a little bit ago about the looking at elevated. Mm-hmm. We have a question from Ann via the blog. She asked us, well, Pinellas County is so congested now, how would you construct light rail on busy roads? And that's really kind of the next steps of that process, is it not?
Well, and Ann wanted to say that's one of the reasons we focused early on an elevated system and looked again at a monorail type system at the time that had a very small footprint on the ground, and you'd be able to work within existing rights of way. But even with the project that we're looking at now, we've looked at the availability of right-of-way in the corridors or in the roadway alignments that we're considering. Some will require some additional right-of-way. If you think about Pinellas County, as you mentioned, it's a very small county. We don't have the ability to introduce new roadway alignments, so we're constrained by the corridors already developed. One of the other pieces of that, though, that we're introducing this time is looking at the CSX rail corridor. That corridor we're looking at as being instrumental to the overall master plan for the county in the future, but even with this first project, we're looking at utilizing some pieces of that in the Clearwater area as well as the St. Petersburg area. So we recognize the challenges in Pinellas County, and the project is looking at how we address those.
And Vice Mayor Crozier, really ties in with what you said at the very beginning, does it not?
Oh yeah, this is what it's all about, to look through and do this due diligence. And so many of the questions that have come in are great because we have worked through these and they are challenging. And many of us even said, gee, I'd like to see either the elevated or how would I envision a light rail or a bus going down one of my main thoroughfares. And so it's interesting that the people are thinking the way we are, because it's the same way that we have to think and process the analysis, the report that we're going to come up with.
And as we all know, as been through this process and still working on it, you know, one of the questions and the issues that come up is not just the alignment and technology, but it's always costs. You know, how much does it cost? You know, when do you do it? How does that all fit in? We have a question about cost from Stephen on the telephone. His question to us is, well, what are the costs per average mile for a rail project? And you know, and I know that's something we all looked at, and there's some national averages and others. And as I recall, Brad, I believe it's $70 million a mile. Looking at now, that's the full entire cost, is it not?
Right. Right, and as we've discussed, I mean, that includes right-of-way, the engineering, the environmental analysis that we have to do to be successful at getting federal funds, and of course the construction. But the costs vary, but that's about what we're using as our estimate as we move forward in this project.
Right, and it's a varied range in terms of what the costs are, because as you have more information, you're able to really dig down and get better numbers as you're able to get better information about exactly where is it, how much is that right away that Sarah mentioned, cost, where are the stations and what type of development that the mayor mentioned. All of those factors will play into the ultimate cost of a project. We have a blog question from Dale who asks, can we have a few examples of cities that use bus rapid transit? Brad?
Well, there's a couple in the United States. I mean, the idea for it actually came from Brazil. There was a city down there that was sort of the first or the poster child for bus rapid transit. One of the most recent major investments was in Cleveland, Ohio. Bus rapid transit in Cleveland and in other areas seems to be a very successful project for very high density corridors that already exist. In Cleveland, they built a it's called Euclid Avenue BRT line that goes through some of their major hospitals and right downtown to where their Cleveland Indians baseball stadium and basketball arena go. It was fairly built out. It had very high ridership bus lines, and ridership has really boomed on that system since they gave it its own. They basically built a curb up so that cars could not go in its right of way, and they built a whole separate line for the BRT, and ridership really has grown, but it has not necessarily spurred on new development, but it's increased transit's share of the work and commuting patterns along that corridor.
And Mayor Hibbard and Secretary Skelton, you know, this is a very project-specific analysis, but I know as part of other efforts, MPOs and through TBARTA, you have looked at other cities to see what types of premium transit they were putting into place and what worked and what didn't, to see how they may apply to this region.
We have. Through TBARTA, we went to Charlotte and Dallas and Denver. We wanted to compare some areas that are more similar to the Tampa Bay area and seeing what has worked. The encouraging thing is the ridership numbers that were expected versus what has occurred are much better. And the development is followed. In some cases, you've seen investment of 6 times what was invested to build the transit. That is a very large number. We are hoping more for a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio. We would be excited about, obviously. But there's some low-hanging fruit, as Sarah said, with the CSX line. I think that's really important. And I think also that we need to keep in perspective is the roads that we're building, and the Secretary can expand on that, are not free, and they are not free to maintain. The overpasses on US 19, I think, are running about $65 million per overpass. And so we need to think about the overall transit system and its costs.
Secretary?
Yeah, good point. And just to reiterate, the cities that we did visit, each one had a little bit different setup, and you know, it wasn't just a cookie cutter type thing. Each one was achieving different results and different objectives with the systems they put in. The mayor's correct, and the US 19 overpasses, and they're successful, and they're moving traffic as they should. They are expensive to do, and as I said earlier, we still do have a significant amount of investment in highways. It's not an either or, it's a complete system, but you have to look beyond just one alternative.
I just want to remind everybody, keep your blog questions coming in. If you're participating by phone, please press 0 to ask your question. I have a question from Al via blog who asks, I'm from up north and love transit, but this is the most tax-ophobic place I've ever lived. How are you going to get buy-in to support a sales tax? I'll open that up to anybody who wishes to take that. Brad?
Well, one thing is, first, we're certainly looking and learning from what happened in Hillsborough a year ago. And one of the things that we're trying to do in Pinellas County is to do a lot of this planning, like we're doing with this alternatives analysis, ahead of time, and come up with a complete plan, a transportation plan for Pinellas County's future, so that when it comes to come before the voters, that they can decide for themselves whether they think Pinellas County needs investment in transit and transportation investments or not. It's not just a light rail or this premium transit, bus rapid transit plan, but we're also at PSTA going to launch into a major bus planning effort to redesign the bus routes that some haven't been changed in 100 years, and come up with a comprehensive plan. Identify some of those road projects that need to be improved in Pinellas County, and put together a complete package of transportation investment to bring to the voters. Now, it may not work, but I think the lesson learned from Hillsborough, in some sense, is to do the planning up front, and then let the voters decide.
And Vice Mayor Crozier and Mayor Hibbard, I know the PAC discussed this, wasn't just about transportation. It was about future. It was about, Brad used the term investment, and Mayor, you used it. This isn't just today, and Sarah, you did also. It's 20, 30, 40 years from now, and how it will ultimately affect Pinellas County.
Well, I think in the last several years, we've all been dealing with tremendous change. I don't believe that gasoline is always going to be at $3.50. I believe that we need to be able to attract businesses. When I talk to other mayors at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the mayors of Charlotte and Dallas and Denver and Atlanta, one of the things that they tell corporations that are looking at moving to the Tampa Bay area is that Tampa does not have mass transit. And in our region, we are spending 25% of our income on transit versus other metropolitan areas at only 19%.
Transportation.
And that's critical, I think. We need to be thinking about the cost of living and the quality of life. And giving people an alternative is important. We're putting this plan out early. We're having meetings like this so that we can discuss it, answer questions, learn more about what citizens are uncomfortable with. And ultimately, as Brad said, you're going to make the final choice. It's your tax dollars, and you get to decide how they're spent.
And I would, of course, go along with everything that's being said, but I think by us learning what the people want, what other communities have done, I know there are other communities that have a transit sales tax, and everybody in that community gets a little piece of the pie to do transit, so that what we can do is it's shared amongst the whole community. But yes, we have to find an alternative, and there is another committee that's looking at that and listening to the people and what they're willing to do. And I'm sure when the PSTA comes up with their vision and their plan, that will help set maybe a foundation for a transit tax, which I hate to say the word, but I think we need to have one in Pinellas County, in the whole Tampa Bay region, in order to support the movement of people all around. And like it's been mentioned before, somebody had asked the question about Hillsborough. Well, we eventually want to connect north, and why not look south? There's a lot of opportunities down there. So I think it's inevitable, but how we get there, we have to make sure that we tell the people and they're involved and they understand and they see how it will benefit them in a long run.
Now that you've heard about what we're trying to do for Pinellas County, let's talk about where we are in the project. In fact, we have a map to specifically show you. As you see in the map shows that the area we're studying with the preliminary route and the proposed locations for the stations. The preliminary route is about 24 miles long. You see on the map that it goes from Clearwater in the northwest, or the left part of your screen, through Clearwater, through Largo, over by Pinellas, St. Pete Clearwater Airport, to the greater Gateway area, and then south down towards St. Petersburg. The Pinellas Alternatives Analysis is just one of the first steps to identify and build the right transit investment for Pinellas County and the region. The goal of the Alternatives Analysis is to identify what we refer to as a locally preferred alternative. This preferred alternative describes generally where the route is, what type of transit service runs on the route, and how much it will cost. Sarah, can you tell everybody exactly where we are in the Alternatives Analysis? We've talked about a lot of things here tonight, and what we've done so far to get there.
Yes. Bob, as you know, the project's been underway for approximately a year, and as the mayor said early in the program, we started looking at the full range of alternative corridors for connecting the three major activity centers. We looked at the roadway options as well as the CSX rail options for connecting downtown St. Petersburg to the Gateway area to downtown Clearwater. Through the process of technical analysis, stakeholder input, and the stakeholders include our community partners, we winnowed those options down to the alignment that you see on the map that was shown on the map earlier. We also started looking at a full range of transit technologies, full range of rail technologies, as well as bus rapid transit. And as we also earlier indicated, bus rapid transit can take more than one shape. Buses running in mixed traffic, perhaps with signal priority, or buses in their own guideway. So we've eliminated some of the transit technology options that we don't feel are appropriate for Pinellas County. Again, that was through a combination of technical work through our consulting team, but also input from the public as to their preferences. We also have been working with the local governments along the corridors to identify areas for potential station locations. And we have narrowed the focus in terms of our station locations and the station types, and that gets to the level of development around those station areas. So where we are now, the project should be wrapping up in the next 2 or 3 months, really with final decisions being made on what we call the locally preferred alternative early in 2012. That will be the final decision on the route in terms of the alignment, the technology, and the station locations, as well as the financing plan. And I should say with the financing plan, we have looked at a number of options for financing. And as I indicated earlier, it's a partnership. So we've looked at ranges of financing that looks at a mix of local, state, and federal funding, and we'll be narrowing that down as well over the course of the next month or so.
Using the route we've just showed you tonight, we are discussing the last remaining question. Should it be bus, as in bus rapid transit, or should it be rail, as in light rail transit? There's best way to really answer this question is to look at how well each type of transit moves people and how much benefit there is compared to its cost. Brad, you're new to the area. You're the transit guy with PSTA. Kind of what do you see as the benefits of the project and the differences in what we're talking about here tonight?
Well, really, the key reason for building or investing in this kind of premium transit is what we've been talking about. It's about creating economic opportunity and new jobs, and how Pinellas County is going to create that development and economy. Are we going to do it in the same way that Pinellas County has grown so far? There's really no more opportunity to keep doing that. We're built out. This is an opportunity for us to concentrate development around this corridor and build again and get new jobs and new development. I've been in other areas around the country and seen it. Young people will move here. Will move into new apartments along the alignment and go to new restaurants and new jobs that will be created along the alignment. Everywhere across the country this has happened. If we invest in our transportation infrastructure, it will create the development and boost Pinellas County's economy.
Over the summer, we heard that a return on investment, such as more jobs, is very important to the public. One of the major benefits of premium transit investment is its ability to rejuvenate the economy by attracting new businesses and concentrating new development around station areas. Mayor Hibbard, we've been talking a lot about economic development here tonight. Can we really expect new companies to be attracted to Pinellas County because of a choice we make related to transit? And secondly, and from a financial point of view, which technology do you believe is a wise investment?
Well, we're still narrowing down the technology, and as has been said, it's either going to be BRT or a light rail. The light rail, I do believe, has advantages because it shows a commitment, and a commitment that development can be built around those corridors, be it residential, commercial, and the corridors that we have because of the CSX line and elsewhere have tremendous potential. We know from talking to other regions that our lack of transportation in this area is a drawback. It goes to cost of living, quality of life. Companies have to be able to move their people around. And so we are going to have to face this one way or another. As everyone said, we're constrained. We can't continue to build roads. I've said building more roads is like dealing with obesity by loosening your belt. We've got to figure out new ways. And by having rail or BRT, it's going to make Brad's bus system more efficient. It means you may ride a bus for 4 or 5 blocks to get to the ultimate rail line and go all the way to Gateway or St. Petersburg and take a bus another couple blocks. But you're going to know how long a trip is going to take you when you have a fixed guideway. And that's something we don't have here.
One of the things that we often hear is that the statement that out of the top 20 metropolitan areas in the country, Tampa Bay is the only area that does not have an investment in premium transit. Brad, you've experienced this same process, these same decisions, as you mentioned in other parts of the country. You mentioned earlier Charlotte as one of those. Why do you think the city and county, really the whole region in the Charlotte area, chose light rail, and how successful do you see it being since they've made that decision?
Well, Charlotte was certainly a boom town in the 1980s and 1990s, and the citizens watched itself continue to grow. And unlike this area, there's no water barriers to keep it from growing. It was growing further out and sort of sprawling out. And frankly, the community decided that they didn't want to become the next Atlanta, and they wanted a new type of development pattern focused on corridors that emanated from the downtown, and that's why they invested in the light rail program, and it has been a huge success for Charlotte. It is on the front page of all of their Chamber of Commerce promotional materials. On every magazine, it is their signature now. Their light rail system, and they have seen the development come all the way up and down the line. People are moving there. People used to, kids would grow up, they'd go to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill or Raleigh and not come back. Now they're coming back to Charlotte, living along the light rail, and there's job opportunities there. The ridership on day one of the system was about 30% higher than they had expected. They're having parking problems at some of the stations now because it's so popular.
Well, that really goes to a question we received via telephone from Ray, who asked the question, well, what kind of impact would this have on businesses opening and being successful? You're saying the proof is in the pudding in Charlotte of it very successful. And they asked, do you really think, and it really was emphasized here, think it will have a large impact on the business community? I mean, Mayor,
I don't think there's any question. One of the biggest challenges Clearwater has is getting around, because we're not on 275. 19 is on our eastern side of the town. I think it would certainly benefit Largo. Gateway is one of the large business centers. If we have connection to Howard Franklin going over to West Shore, that's another connection that allows people to live in these centers along these corridors and eliminate a car. That's a real benefit to somebody's lifestyle, is to have that choice. And we're concentrating the development so that a lot of the people who are accustomed and want to maintain their suburban lifestyle will be able to. But we'll be taking cars off of the road, so those who don't have a choice and have to drive, it won't be as congested. And all of the goods that have to move, which is one of Secretary Skelton's greatest challenges, they're not going to be competing as much either.
Vice Mayor Crozier, let's talk about local, at the local level, community. The mayor mentioned Largo, you know, and really all greater Pinellas County. How do you think bus rapid transit or a light rail investment could positively benefit at the community level, and which technology do you think has the greatest potential?
Well, first, let me say that I'm very pleased to say along the route, East Bay, then you go under 19 and you're on Roosevelt. Well, over on the right-hand side used to be an old mall called Crossroads Mall. Well, let me tell you, we now have a business going up there. Well, guess what? It wasn't too long ago, I'd say within 2 or 3 months, somebody came knocking at the door. They're taking the other piece of the property and they're building condos because they know there's going to be a station there. These are going to be, at first it was apartments. No, they're going to be upscaled apartments and condos mixed. I think it's a combination. First it was going to be 1 and 2 bedrooms. Now they're adding 3 bedrooms. It's going to be a gated community because they already know by investing in that corner where there's going to be a station, then their residents will get down. They actually came to us and said, we need less parking spaces. And I asked the question, who builds 200 plus units and wants less? Usually 2, because we're building a lot of 1 bedrooms. We are targeting, as you had said earlier, the single resident, the new person out of college that's got this great job but doesn't want to live maybe in a big sprawling downtown and wants to live a little bit outside. We're already seeing that, and I know darn well it's because they know where the route's going, they know where some of the tentative stations are going to be, so it is already, I'm seeing a little bit of an impact. I'm getting inquiries about from businesses that have been for a very long time along the corridor that are wondering, what can I do? What is going to change? And there's going to be a change, and I think it's starting little by little. And I prefer, because when I was a young kid, we lived outside of Chicago. Mom used to take a group of us to the train station. We took the train all the way downtown. On Saturday, went to the Art Institute, did homework, research, whatever, got on the train and went back. I love the train. And I think the train is a big motivator to bring the youth back that has left, they bring them back. And we have a small train in Largo Central Park. And I'm telling you, the line is so long the first weekend of every month. And the interesting thing is, it's total donation to ride the train. They make enough money every month to support the tracks, and they have 2 or 3 other little engine trains throughout down in Fort Myers, other places. They make so much money in Pinellas because the people bring their kids, the kids love it. And I understand bus rapid transit, but I really think it's the train that's going to bring and build our development. And I think it will have a very positive impact on our community.
Secretary Skelton, talking about building communities and transportation projects, and specifically this project, how do you think this project and the overall effort really kind of brings the whole region together?
Well, when you look at the entire Tampa Bay region, there are a lot of resources here. The key in making those resources, making this area stronger, both economically and with the benefits we've talked about, is tying those resources together. Transportation does that. A project such as this, again, as a standalone project, probably doesn't have the regional impact until you start making those connections, until you get across the bay, get to Tampa, get north of Tampa, get south of Tampa, and start really bringing all those synergistic resources together. Then this region will grow stronger economically.
Along those lines, talking about the region and connections, we have a blog question from Ricky, who asked the question, and it's totally different than this specific alternatives analysis project, but he asked the question, I think this area would benefit from a ferry system that would connect all of the bay together. Secretary, want to take a shot at that first?
Well, I know that the Hillsborough MPO had gotten a ferry boat discretionary grant from the federal government to look at ferry service from the eastern side of McKay Bay over to MacDill. And so that's something that's realistically being looked at. I think it could go a step further, and we start talking about bigger systems and incremental implementation. Then you start talking about, can you get across the bay? Can you connect a downtown Tampa to a downtown St. Petersburg? I think we need to look at it a little bit more, see if that has some viability. But that's the type of thinking that we've got to think differently. We've talked about visions here tonight, a vision of a place that's very different from what we've been used to and what we've grown up with.
And I know, Sarah, I know that the ferries are something that the Pinellas MPO has looked at in the past. And I think it's really about timing and cost of how you would look to implement something like that.
Yes, we've looked at connecting the beach communities along the coast in Pinellas County, and we also been participating in the Hillsborough Ferry study currently underway. And although the focus now is on providing access to MacDill, we did identify some other areas we need to look at in terms of connecting downtown Tampa, St. Pete, via the water areas. And so certainly I think that's a part of the mix. And I think, again, if we think back to the regional master plan, the TBARTA master plan from your agency, Mr. Clifford, that water ferries, waterborne transport was certainly a part of that discussion. And I think as we look at our long-term vision, it should be a part of the mix. We have the water here as such a wonderful resource, so we need to use it. Yes.
Brad, we have a blog question from Matthew, who asked the question, well, I hear and sounds like you're talking about the redesign of PSTA. And it sounds like but this sounds like you're talking about expanding it. However, all he has seen is a contraction of bus routes. How's this going to be reversed?
Well, that's a great question, and we're trying to look to the future and how we can grow and improve the system. Unfortunately, PSTA has gone through a couple of years here of some tough budgetary times, and we've had to make some cuts. Luckily, we've been able to try to analyze our system and make the most efficient reductions as possible, and our ridership has actually grown during that period of time, even though we've taken about a 6 to 10% cutback in our service. But hopefully, and we're all expecting that the economy is going to improve, and this region is going to grow again. We've seen, I think, maybe the bottom hit, and there's some incremental positive signs coming on the horizon, and we can't just sit idly back, or else it'll be 5 or 10 more years. These are long processes. We need to look to the long-term future for our region, and that's what this premium transit study is all about. And PSTA needs to be looking more immediately. How can we be more efficient with the dollars we have now? And that's part of the sort of look at the redesign of our system. But also, we need to be ready for these kinds of changes that we're all talking about in the future. And the bus routes need to work in harmony with whatever we build. When I was in Charlotte, once they put the light rail in, all of the bus system increased its ridership too by 10%. It makes the whole network of transportation work better. And so PST wants to be there and ready to go.
Mayor Hibbard, we have a question. I know something you and I have talked about before. There's from Willie, who's a sports fan, and he asks about connecting to sports, the sports franchise facilities, the Rays, the Bucks, the Lightning, and looking at this and how are we working with them and ensuring that ultimately we can get to those connections.
Well, this potential alignment in Pinellas County would go right to Tropicana Field. Certainly you want to be able to go to those centers that everyone in the Tampa Bay region wants to get to. When we look at the TBARTA plan, we may not get right to Tampa Stadium, but we're going to get real close. And then, you know, what we've always talked about is a spine and a rib system. And the spine is that rail system. And then Brad gives us all of the ribs with the bus system. So you may be taking a shorter trip on the bus to get to the spine that gives you that rapid transit. But that's what we're really moving toward. I think one of the things we've also missed in this conversation is getting to the airports and also serving our tourists, which is still our #1 industry. And this is of huge benefit to them.
Oh, absolutely. One final question that we'll get for a blog from Gordon. I'm going to go to the engineer in the group here, Secretary Skelton, who has, Gordon asked us the question, would this project be built all at once?
Again, we've hit on it tonight. You work towards an overall arching plan and build it incrementally. You need to build it in cost feasible segments that are functional. And so it's not all going to happen overnight, and it's not all going to happen at one time. It will be built in pieces. How you phase that and get the most competitive pieces built first is extremely important.
Want to thank everybody tonight for our panelists for participating, and maybe ask each one of you for any closing comments you may have. Start with Vice Mayor Crozier.
Wow. Keep them questions coming. That's what I can say. I think this was great, and I hope that the people learned a lot. And if you need further questions or want to stay in tune, I think you've told us
I'm going to give them the information.
you're going to give them the information, but also pick up the phone and call us at our various municipalities, and we will be glad to fill you in and work with you so that you have a good understanding. And I'm just pleased to be here.
Thank you. Sarah?
Just continuing along those lines, it's a community decision. And one of the first goals established for this project is to have something that the community could support. So we need your support as we go forward, and we just say continue to stay engaged.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity. I feel very honored to have come down to this community and have such positive thinking folks that are looking at this investment for their future. So it's I'm looking forward to it continuing on.
Secretary Skelton?
Just want to reiterate that it's open discussions like we're having tonight, like it's going to continue with the community. That's healthy debate, and that's what we need. And again, reiterate that we are stronger as a region together. It's not competition of Pinellas versus Hillsborough. It's all together moving forward.
And then wrap it up, Mayor Hibbard.
Well, I think that's the great point. We're competing with other cities around the nation for jobs and for quality of life. I appreciate everybody being engaged tonight. I hope they continue to do research, because ultimately all of you will be making that decision. But we are trying to make this region better, a place that our kids and grandkids are going to want to come back to and live. And sometimes you have to make an investment to make that happen.
We want to thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate your participation. The eTownHall blog and phone lines are now closed. If we didn't get to your question or comment, you have multiple ways to contact us. You can go to the project website at PinellasOnTrack.com and submit your question online. You can leave us a message at the end of the call. You can call us at 727-346-8448 and leave a message for our staff. We'll get back to all of the questions and provide you with answers for them. Also, please visit the websites we've mentioned during this evening's event to find out ongoing information about transportation issues in Pinellas County and our entire region. Thanks again for joining us, and make sure you join us again for another eTownHall event on January 18th. On behalf of the entire panel, have a great evening. Thank you.